Hi everyone, I hope you're well. I'm going to very quickly record some feedback videos for you for your mock exam, your mock tasting exam. Okay, I'm doing this off the fly. I'm not rehearsed, I'm not practiced, I don't have a script. So please forgive any ums and ahs or pauses or perhaps any knocks on the door that I might get. But I'm very aware that time is running away with us and we're getting close to your exam date. And I want you to be as prepared as possible, of course. So the following videos are dedicated to the wines that I sent you in your mock exam tasting pack. You had 4 wines, which is the equivalent of 2 papers. You'll know by now, I'm sure, that the tasting exam consists of 2 wines, 1 white, 1 red. The white wine could be sweet or it could be a dry or an off-dry example. But you could get something like a Sauterne or a Tokaj, so be prepared for that as well. And then the second wine will be a red wine. There's no sparkling, no fortified, no rosé, just white wine or red wine. So I have sent you some examples of the sorts of things that you might expect to get in an exam. The idea is that you sit down, you taste the wines, you write your tasting note according to the systematic approach to tasting, using the exam technique that I've taught you, making sure that you try and capture all of the marks that you can. Then you can sit down and you can watch these videos, get the feedback, mark your own tasting notes. Anything you're unsure of course, send them to me to ask for clarification and work out how you did. And it will give you a good idea of how you might perform in the exam on the 4th of November. So again, accept my apologies that these videos might not be that great a quality, but hopefully they'll give the information that you need to help you better prepare for the exam. Okay, right, let's start with sample A. I think I labelled them A, B, C and D. A and B are tasting paper 1, and then C and D were tasting paper 2. So let's look at sample number A, number 8, letter A. Okay. So sample A, which is what I have in my glass here. So looking at this, I would say that the appearance of this is pale lemon. Very difficult online to be able to accurately assess the appearance of this. You could argue that there are slight green tinges, but I would probably award marks to you whether you said lemon or lemon green, but it's definitely pale. I wouldn't be awarding marks for medium or deep or of gold, amber or brown. So either pale, it's got to be pale, or lemon green or lemon. Okay, now let's look at the nose. Remember, there are 5 marks available for the nose. 1 for the aroma intensity. I've got that wrong already. 6 marks available for aroma for the nose. 1 for aroma intensity, 5 for the aroma characteristics, 1 for the development. Okay, so pronounced intensity. Absolutely, this falls into the category of pronounced in intensity. Now, those aroma characteristics, let's split them into primary, secondary and tertiary. Always good practice to write that down. They're not always going to be there. You're not always going to have secondary and tertiary characteristics in your wine. If you have got secondary and tertiary characteristics in your wine, the WSET insist that you observe them, that you write them down. If you don't, if there are secondary characteristics in your wine and you don't record that in your tasting note, you drop marks. Okay, even if you've written 5 accurate primary descriptors, because you haven't picked up the oak or the lees or the malolactic fermentation, they're not going to give you the marks that are assigned to those secondary characteristics. So it's always good practice to look for them. And then if they're not there, fair enough. You don't have to record them and you can commit all of your marks into that primary category. And this is an example of a wine that only has primary aromas. There's no tertiary characteristics in here. There's no secondary characteristics. It's all about the primary characteristics. And we have to find 5 of them to describe this wine. Firstly, it's pat with green fruit. So let's go apple, gooseberry, pear. Okay, then we've got some citrus fruit as well. Grapefruit, lemon and lime. I would list all of those down. It's got some herbaceous notes as well. Green bell pepper, it's very grassy, lots of grass in there. So if you wrote grass down, well done. And I would throw in asparagus and blackcurrant leaf as well. Perhaps wet stones. It's got some wet stone notes in there too. Going backwards a bit, I think we've got a little bit of stone fruit in here as well. Nectarine perhaps, or white peach perhaps. It's got a bit of a stone fruit, but it's not really overt, but it's got some stone fruit notes in there as well. And definitely some passion fruit. So we've covered loads of clusters in here, which is telling us that this wine is complex. It's not a simple wine. So if you had written simple down in your tasting note, you wouldn't get the mark for that, because this is absolutely complex. We've got green fruit notes, citrus fruit, stone fruit notes. We've got herbaceous characters as well, perhaps even some other. And I've just suddenly thought elderflower too. So let's go elderflower to add to the complexity of this wine. But no tertiary, no secondary notes. Right. Just to make it clear, I'm sitting here with my lexicon, but you can't. All right. When you're doing your mock exams, don't use your lexicon because you can't take it into the exam room with you. Okay. The other thing that we have to mention, and don't forget this, students forget this all the time, and it's losing one of those valuable marks that they could pick up, and that's to comment on the development. There are no tertiary characteristics in this wine, so therefore it is a youthful wine. Development is a measure of how many tertiary characteristics there are in a wine. No tertiary characteristics, the wine is youthful. Some tertiary characteristics, the wine is developing. Lots of tertiary characteristics, the wine is fully developed. Okay, this is youthful, no tertiary characteristics. Right, let's move on to the palate. Okay, sweetness, it's dry. The acidity is high. No tannin. You don't have to mention tannin, it's a white wine. Whilst technically white wine can have tannin in at level 3, we don't want you to worry about that. So ignore tannin, just move on. Don't bother even writing that down. The alcohol is medium. The body is medium as well. Let's say medium bodied. The flavour intensity, absolutely, this is pronounced again just like it was on the nose, and you will often find that the intensity on the aroma is in line with the intensity on the palate as well. The other thing I need to make clear is that you absolutely, when you write your tasting note, you write pronounced flavour intensity in full. Don't just write pronounced, write it in full. So it is absolutely clear to the examiner that when you say pronounced, you're referring to the acidity, you're referring to the flavour intensity. Okay, same with acidity, for example. Write down high acidity. Don't just write down high, because the examiner will not know what you're talking about. So you must write high acidity in order to pick up that full mark. Okay, so pronounced flavour intensity. Flavour characteristics, the descriptors you use to describe the flavour, should be in line with those that you picked up on the nose. Okay, so a good technique is to repeat them. What you found on the nose, just repeat it on the palate. But sometimes you might pick up a little bit something different on the palate. I do. My palate is far more efficient at assessing flavour than my nose is. And so very often I find extra words to help me describe a wine when I have it in my mouth. So, but at the very least, make sure you write down on the palate what you wrote on the nose, and then you can add to it if you like. I can see the picture is quite grainy, so I apologise for that. To be honest, perfectly honest with you, the flavours are completely in line with what we picked up on the palate, on the nose. Perhaps a little bit more gooseberry, perhaps a little bit more peach in there as well, a little bit more stone fruit coming through, touch more herbaceous, nettles, a little bit of blackcurrant leaf. Okay, but still no secondary, still no tertiary, so don't mention those because you're not going to get marks for those. The finish of this wine is where I'm a little bit disappointed, I think. It's probably the finish that's the one thing that holds this wine back from being outstanding. I think it's a great wine, but it's not an outstanding wine, and it's that finish. It just dropped off just that little bit too quickly. So I'm going to say medium plus in terms of its finish, its length. So describe it as a medium plus finish. And that takes us to very good quality. Again, during my argument, I would say that this wine has excellent balance. The acidity makes it lovely and refreshing. It's got a really tangy feel on the palate, which is really satisfactory, really pleasing. It is pronounced. We said that on both the nose and on the palate, and it's got complexity as well. There's loads of different flavour characteristics going on in this wine. But it's just that finish where it drops off just that little bit too quickly. I'd expect an outstanding wine for the finish just to linger and be a little bit more persistent. So I'm going to class this as very good. I think if you had said outstanding, then I think I might accept that. But only if you'd assigned the finish as long. Okay. So your argument, your conclusion has to match up with the tasting note that you've written. And then I will look at, because it'll be me that's marking your exams, and I will look at each one individually and say, well, does their tasting note make sense? And does it correspond with the quality that they've given it? Okay. Drink now, not suitable for aging. Okay, these lovely, fresh, citrusy, peachy characteristics, that high acidity, the vibrancy of this wine doesn't really have potential for aging. This will not benefit from having tertiary characteristics. Okay, this is a wine that is enjoyable now. It's a delight now. It's not a wine that is intended to be put into the cellar and see what tertiary characteristics evolve. So I would say drink now, not suitable for aging. Okay, and that is your wine number one. Mark your tasting papers. Any queries that you have, come back to me and we can discuss it further. So I'm going to reveal what this wine is now. Okay, so this is, if you hadn't already guessed, it is a Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc, Cloudy Bay to be precise. I think this is a charming wine. I've always loved Cloudy Bay. It was one of the first wines that I started drinking and really enjoying, so I have a strong emotional connection to it as well. And whilst perhaps it's not the stunner that it used to be, and it's certainly more widely available than it used to be, it is a delicious wine in its own right, and it has a place in my fridge. But it's not quite outstanding, and it's definitely not a wine to be cellared, but it's an example of something that often comes up in the exam, and so it's worth understanding and getting to know. Okay, right, so I am going to go and get wine number B, wine letter B, and we will carry on the videos.